Okay, I think we're starting. I'm just going to give it a go. So, good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, whichever one it is for everyone. Thank you for coming. What a beautiful, beautiful backdrop. Can I just ask a question? I've heard a couple of people in the elevator. How many people actually flew in from the West Coast? Wow, so impressive. Yeah, really, super, super impressive. So welcome. Forgive our dirty air over here, but it just keeps us on edge. Okay, well, good morning again. I am your panelist, moderator. My name is Michelle Collins. I am the president and CXO, Chief Experience Officer, of a non-agency. And today's panel is about a very candid discussion around building generational wealth. So it's going to be a little bit different than I think you're going to expect. I hope you will receive it well. We have three rather spectacular guests. They each represent a very different, unique journey, and they are also three very successful entrepreneurs. And I think the conversation to be had is, you can have a title, you can have a company, but really the journey and how you got there is very compelling and interesting. So I want to first say thank you to Ace Next Gen for asking us to do this. I would also give them such credit that they are always looking to find true, authentic stories and compelling individuals. And it's not just about picking anybody and anyone. So let's first give, where's Kat? Where is Kat? She's running around here. So I just want to give Kat a big applause. This is really not easy, so kudos to her. All right, so I'll give you a little bit of backstory myself, because I guess I'm somewhat qualified to be up here with these distinguished guests. I am a New Yorker of over 20 years, so I started my business when I was 6 years old. And my journey was not traditional, but I will also say that being a part of this community was not the normal path. And it really took me a very different kind of turn to get here. And one of the ways that I connected with each of these individuals, which is also really important to note, is it started with one first connection, and he's actually here today. So I'd like to introduce him first, and then he introduced me to the next individual, and then they both knew this individual, so we are all very much connected, and that's what being a community is. And I think that's really also about the conversation we're going to have today. So let me, with great honor, introduce Rick Cheuck. And Rick is the founder, and he is one of the top wealth management advisors in the United States right now. So I would give that as a nod to Rick. Rick, do you mind sharing a story? And what I love about Rick is he's so put together, he's so precise, but he has such heart. So let's hear about Rick's story.
Thank you, Michelle. So good morning, everyone. So my name is Rick Cheuck. I'm a global speaker, wealth management advisor, founder and CEO of Midas Wealth. Before I share with all of you my professional journey, I'll share with you all my personal journey. So in the 1970s, my parents migrated from China to America, and in the 1980s, they had me, their first and only child. So growing up, my parents were always really hardworking. We frankly grew up poor. My parents were on Medicaid. They thought that was the best thing they can get. My father was a chef. My mom was a cashier at a supermarket. They worked really hard, and one thing I was taught was hard work would solve everything. But what I also noticed was I grew up being raised by my grandmother. They didn't really spend much time with me. But the little time I spent with them, they always emphasized the importance of education and hard work. So when I was growing up, I went to school 7 days a week. Monday through Friday, regular school. Saturday, I went to Chinese school. Sunday, I went to Kaplan Princeton Review to get great grades, to go to good schools. And they also pretty much painted my life. They said, in life, we're gonna be three professions. Doctors, lawyers, you guys are all smiling. Your parents are like my parents, part of the same community. And engineers. I failed them. I realized when I was younger, my superpower was math, but I realized it wasn't because I loved doing math problems, it was simply because I loved doing what is called problem solving. So when I went to college, I majored in finance, and upon graduating in 2007, I was going to be an investment banker. But it was my last interview in 2007 that changed my life. My parents always taught me to keep all your windows of opportunity open. So it was an interview to be a wealth management advisor. When I asked them, what is the difference between financial planning, wealth management, and investment banking, the difference and similarities were investment bankers help corporations make lots of money. Financial planners, wealth management advisors help people make lots of money. Rick, what do you think you'd be more passionate about? And I said, I want to help people. And back then in '07, the hiring manager said, did you know in America, Asian population represent less than 6% of Americans' population. However, they have one of the worst savings rate and the highest poverty rate. You guys are hardworking, but has one of the highest poverty in your population. Do you think you have what it takes to help your community? And I said, I believe I did. So after that interview, I accepted the offer on the spot, went home to my parents, and I thought in my mind how proud they would be of me. But to my surprise, when I told my father and mother that I'm going to go into financial planning, wealth management, my father and mother said, son, are you a goddamn idiot? Why would you give up investment banking to go into wealth management? And I said, Dad, Mom, I wanted to help the community. I wanted to change people's lives. And then they said, fine, but if you fail, I'll give you 1 year. If you fail, you'll come back and you follow the directions we painted for you. So my first 6 months, and I was very transparent, share with all of you, I struggled in my rowing career. Because as an only child, I was always taught to be passive, to be quiet, to be good at math. But I was never taught how to be social. So I was introverted, and I had difficulty speaking in public rooms, talking to people one-on-one, looking at people's eyes, because my parents told me it was rude and disrespectful. So I had to learn all those things. But after 6 months of being in financial planning, I was put on probation to be fired. Because I was one of the worst in the class that year. An average advisor, on average, acquires about 4 clients a month. In 6 months, I had less than 4. So as I was put on probation, my mentors, peers says, Rick, this is just not the right profession for you. You aren't really good. I went home to my parents, and my parents said, you aren't really good. Get a real job. But after those 6 months, and I always say this, we all have a choice. We can be told what we can be in life, or we can develop the superpower to start talking to ourselves and create our destiny in life. So those 6 months afterwards, I was put on 30-day probation. I started talking to myself. I started saying words of affirmation. I started believing myself. I started seeing my future and making it happen. After those 30 days, I acquired 10 clients in 1 month. In the next 6 months, taken off of probation, I became the top of my class. Second year, I was #1 in my region. By the third year, I was the youngest managing director in the country. And I was assigned a role to recruit, train, and develop, and I chose Chinatown, Manhattan, New York. Why? Because I remember my roots. I wanted to help the Asian community, to teach them that Medicaid is not the best. Having access to capital, understanding your tax returns, weaponizing your ability to borrow and leverage is better. So those 5 years of being in Chinatown, I took our team from a team of 5 to a team of 50, and we became the #1 office in the country. But when you are, thank you.
Yes, that deserves an applause.
Thank you. When you are top of the world, you're always reminded how fragile life is. By my 6th year, I coughed blood at work because I was working so hard, taught by my Asian parents. And my wife and I got engaged, and I had a choice to choose my career or choose work-life balance. I made a choice. I chose my wife and my future family. So I retired in my 6th year. In my 7th year, I started all over again and built Midas Wealth, which is named after my son, Midas. When I started the firm, I had a vision. I wanted to create a financial planning experience that is different and unique, which is why today, Midas Wealth, we're a team of 12. We have in-house CFAs, CFPs, and MBAs. We act as a family office. And I'll share with you what family office is. Generally, in society, it's the ultra-high net worth, the 100 million billionaires that have access to their own family office. I created our firm to give access to everyday people so we can solve all their financial challenges. And humbly speaking, after the 2nd year of building Midas Wealth, we were recognized by Forbes as one of the top firms in the nation, and we're ranked as one of the top firms in New York State. So that's my background story. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Before we go to Lawrence, I want to pick up on something that Rick said I thought was really brilliant, which was, I actually, Rick advises me. And not very often do you have someone who's willing to advise you on just your financial asset management and strategies, but very quickly I realized that Rick was actually interested in my overall well-being. So there were moments where I was questioning certain things or wanting to do certain things, and he never hesitates. If he knows someone or has access to something that he can help you with, he helps. And we're here to talk about generational wealth. How do you get there? So it's not only rooted in asset management, because we're going to talk about that a little later, but there is the stereotype and the understanding of what generational wealth means. It's a vertical conversation, and it's not that. So in his advocacy of me and wanting to share his wealth of knowledge and his network, he introduced me to the gentleman to his right, Lawrence. Now, Lawrence, you may not recognize Lawrence because you can't see his hair. Normally we know Lawrence because I can see his hair from across the room. But today, the gentleman to the right, I'm going to introduce Lawrence. He, a wonderful human being, a tremendous path. Lawrence?
Okay, so I'm clearly not as buttoned up as my friend Rick over here, and I'm dealing with this whole Bell's palsy situation. I'm trying to overcome it. It's been about a month. Anybody with Bell's palsy before? Okay. Now, when I was asked to speak about generational wealth, I had to think about it a little bit because I'm not extraordinarily wealthy. I don't have a background of extensive education, but I do have a wealth of knowledge through life experiences. And I wanted to share with you guys my upbringing. I grew up here in New York City's Chinatown. I live in Southern California now, in Irvine. And I grew up without a dad. And when I don't have a dad, so I didn't have that foundation or structure, which of course eventually led me to a lot of problems. I got recruited by gangs, did a ton of bad stuff, and I'll share with you guys what I did back then if you guys really want to know. But I got locked up for a year. But all these experiences have created wealth for me, where I can actually talk about and share with friends of mine, and of course my two young boys. I want to make sure that they don't have the same path that I do. I also have ADHD, and my mind is everywhere. Anybody, by show of hands, have ADHD? I know a few of you that really have ADHD, and I don't have it. But yeah, so I've been experimenting throughout my life with different types of businesses. I started my first business when I was 13 years old, hustling and selling baseball cards and memorabilia, and also fireworks in the street of Chinatown. I mean, that was kind of my way of making things, because my mom worked at a post office, but I needed to buy some, video games. I saw all the kids have video games, so I wanted to buy that. But I have since started about 15 businesses. About 2/3 of them have failed. But the 5 or so that I have become successful with have gotten me to a point where I can take care of my family. But the other ones, all the failures, I have actually learned a lot from. And that's kind of shaped me to the person I am today, a business person, a friend, a mentor. And I'm really excited about being part of this organization, ACE NextGen, because it champions entrepreneurship and that next generation of small business owners. And when I was here in New York, I was also part of Apex for Youth, which is a great organization helping inner city kids in at-risk communities. And I wish I had that when I was growing up. But in the future, I'm hoping that I can get more involved in the organization here. I'm on the board right now, and I just wanted to thank all of you for coming, and all the board members. You guys are doing a great job. Much more work than me, but I'm looking forward to the years to come. And with my hoodie over here, definitely doesn't match this stage. I'll pass it along to you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I want to give Lawrence a lot of credit where he's actually not taking credit. So this past year, I decided to have my coming out party, meaning I had never really identified with my Asian community. So Collins will tell you that I'm adopted, and I just didn't grow up with the sense of identifying with that. So I could relate to not having this sense of kind of familial roots. I also had this very disconnected sense, was I really Asian? I didn't really understand what that meant and looked like. I mean, honestly, I said, I don't have a lot of Asian friends, but now I do. Look at this room. But when Rick introduced me to Lawrence, Lawrence was there constantly. When there were moments where I was really questioning whether I could accomplish something, or why was I doing all this, or why was I putting myself on the line, he was there on the phone talking me through the whole thing. So when we talk about generational wealth, when we talk about wealth, wealth is also about the amount of knowledge you yourself have obtained through life experiences, and then most importantly, how you give. If you're just constantly looking to take and to acquire what you consider to be wealth, you're doing a disservice not only to yourself, but to those around you. So I give Lawrence a lot more credit than I think he's giving himself on this stage. So with that.
I'll take the credit.
Never mind. Never mind.
So to Michelle's point, it's wealth of wisdom through life experiences, right?
Yes, of course, exactly as he said, wealth of wisdom. So our next panelist is she's just brilliant. And I love her because her spirit I very much relate to. And I asked Dr. Lanna, what would be your plan? If you didn't succeed, what would be your plan? And she just had one singular statement. And I thought that with her background, I think what I really love about her is her honesty. So here's the truth. We are all overachievers in this room. We have to be perfect. We want to be top of the game. We want to be the best. We want to be the most successful. When do we get to actually say that we are afraid, that we've made a mistake, that we're not achieving? And I think that is something in the community we have to encourage each other to be more honest about, which is you're not always going to be the CEO, the CXO, the number one. You're not always going to be the top 50. All of those things don't matter at the end of the day. That doesn't get you full success and full wealth. What does is you have to lean into it with heart. So I want to set that up to introduce Dr. Lanna Cheuck.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Michelle. I'll first start by saying that I was actually fired as one of the top robotic urologists in the country. A few years later, I was on Forbes as one of the top women in leadership. And the reason why I led with that is because we are all afraid of taking risks, and we are all afraid of failing. My story is that my parents met on the rice fields of China. They were never given an education. They were forced to work on the rice fields, so they only had about a 7th grade education. And just like every other parent, they wanted to give their future children a chance of education, a chance of life, and a chance of opportunities. So they escaped, building a raft, using a compass and a ping pong paddle, and they escaped from China. They were able to get to Macau, and then from Macau they were able to smuggle into Hong Kong on a vegetation boat where they were drugged. They were drugged because they couldn't make any noise for the inspectors. And so when they came to the US, and I was born as a second child, so if in China I would have been unregistered or never been born at all, I never took any of my opportunities or education for granted. So I wanted to become a doctor, and I did, and I was an overachiever, but all throughout my life I was told, stay in your lane, be obedient, don't make any waves, and just listen to what everyone else tells you. We were bred that way, especially as a resident at Brown University, working 120 hours straight. That means 36 hours straight without sleep, and then going back to operate. And so when you go through this trauma in life, and then once you get to the top and you realize, wow, I finally made it. I've lived my life for my parents, I've lived my life for what they wanted me to become. And then you think to yourself, well, what's next, right? How many people here have ever felt like they've done the thing that their parents wanted them to do, but then they were living their life for somebody else and they're like, well, what's next? What is my future? And so I have 2 kids, I have 2 daughters. They are both special needs. I had my daughter prematurely, I was actually operating. Let me tell you the things that happen when you're in surgery, okay? You don't get any time off. I worked for 5 years straight, never took a vacation because patients always needed me. And at some point, after having children, you don't live your life for yourself anymore. You become empowered, you become stronger, you become a mentor, you become someone that you want your kids to look up to. And at that time, I know that my kids are going to depend on me for the rest of their lives. And I knew that if I weren't able to generate generational wealth, that I would never be able to succeed in setting them up for life. And so I asked my chairman for equal pay to the men in my program. And you know what he said? Show me that you're worth it. Show me that I should pay you what I paid the other guys. So I did. Leverage. I got another job offer with 20% more and I showed it to him and guess what he said? I can't pay you this much. You're better off leaving. That was when everything changed for me. That light bulb movement, that moment, that defining moment, I said, you know what? This is not for me. I need to do my own thing. I want to become an entrepreneur. And I started my own business on the side. I became, from a urologist, from a robotic urologist, to owning my own practice in aesthetics. And a lot of people may say, well, aesthetics isn't that just vanity? It's not about vanity. It's about making you look and feel your most confident self so that you can go out there and you can crush it in the world. And that is what I built. And now I have 3 practices, which by the way, I got fired when I was pregnant with my 2nd child. And I got fired not because I wasn't good enough. I was fired not because patients didn't love me. I was fired not because I didn't operate the most and was the most productive surgeon in my practice. But I was fired because they couldn't control me anymore. They knew that if they weren't going to give me the money that I deserved, that I would be looking elsewhere and doing other things. And once I became more successful in the other things, they said, we're firing you. And that's what they did at 8 months pregnant with my 2nd child. So I had no other option but to kill it. And everybody here who's ever felt like they're at the bottom, crying on the bathroom floor, and that light bulb comes on and you're like, you know what? I will never ever let anyone else determine my worth. I determine my worth. I determine my future. Do you guys agree? Thank you. And so now I'm proud to say that I have 3 locations. I build other people up. I'm a speaker. I love Rick. He gives me opportunities. And it's very true what Michelle said, that if you ever needed anything in life, all you need is that one super connector friend who can get you there. And that's why it's so important to build relationships and entrepreneurship and business and everything in the world. You have to know the right people to ask. And that means giving value to them so that they can give value back to you. Thank you so much.
Michelle, sorry, but Dr. Lanna, that was amazing. And I loved hearing these types of stories. I'm sorry if we're interrupting, but I'm just trying to picture you on a boat with a ping pong bat.
It wasn't me, but it was my parents, but thank you. Actually, Lawrence and I went to the same elementary school. We both grew up in Chinatown from very humble beginnings with nothing. So, full circle moment here.
All right, so I want to see if you've all been paying attention. So let's ask the question. Start with the side of the room. How do you define wealth and what does wealth mean to you? In less than 10 words. Yes, sir, in the back. Health. Health is wealth. All right.
Life experiences and opportunities.
Great. Anyone else on this side? Yes, sir, in the back.
Optionality.
Optionality. Look at you being fancy. Would you like to clarify what you mean by optionality?
If you have all the options you want, that's wealth.
Choices. I like that. Okay, this side of the room. Cameraman.
One thing first, I'm also adaptive, what's good. And I would say wealth is
know, but who knows you?
Okay, anybody else on the side of it? Yes, sir?
Abundance.
Abundance. Okay, anyone else? Yes, sir. All right, there you go. All right, so we just played this little game of word Jenga. Nowhere in this room did I hear my portfolio, right? I didn't hear liquidity. I didn't hear all the things that traditionally are discussed. And I think that is fantastic because I was kind of musing and like, what does that word generational wealth even mean? Well, who came up with that term? Is this like a marketing gimmick? Was this started by like a JP Morgan, right? Who came up with that genius term that we all started talking about generational wealth? Now, there is actually a cultural and social connection to why generational wealth as a term came into being. Does anyone in this room know why and how generational wealth became a topic of conversation? Sir?
So, according to this insider, there's billions of dollars being transferred from our past generation to the younger generation, billions that is looking to be figure out how to invest in this. The money pensions opportunity, all up now.
Okay, however, here's kind of the socio-economic driver under that term. It became a conversation going back to Rick, which was about the social disparity of economic success and access to such. So there was this conversation around generational wealth. I always thought, honestly, the generational wealth was just tied to, okay, like the grandparents, the fathers to the children. And then I went, oh no. And then if you go even further back, it was like we women couldn't even inherit property back when, right? It was like, oh, you had a daughter, well, for you. So I want to talk about that specific conversation, and I want to kind of direct this conversation to Rick. So help us understand, how do you help different, because you have a really beautiful wide range of clientele, from the super successful 20-something-year-old who just really gets it, to those of us that are in the better years of our life. And how do you describe it to both sides of the fence?
Sure. So if I were to think about generational wealth, I would add generational curse. Because many people don't understand that as they're trying to achieve wealth, they're actually cursing themselves and the future generation. There's an Asian saying that most wealth do not pass 3 generations. The first generation works hard for it. The second generation inherits it, grows it. The third generation squanders and spends it. How can we go past that generational curse to the 4th, 5th, and beyond? I think if it was to solve that opportunity, it comes down to 3 really important words: communication, education, and planning. Communication is, if you think about generational conversations, in Asian tradition, it's a hierarchy system, right? How many of us grew up and said, hey, you have to respect your elders? And oftentimes, it's very difficult to even communicate with our elders because we're oftentimes told what to do. Like most family trees, it's a hierarchy system. So therefore, like my parents would find it difficult to communicate with me, and I would find it difficult to communicate with my children. But instead of thinking of this as like a vertical hierarchy, what we need to understand when it comes to communication, it's a horizontal, where instead of being across the table from your parents and your children, you need to sit on the same side of the table to communicate with them and help them understand what's the best form of understanding. Number 2 is education. Now, there's a saying, I give you fish, you have food. I teach you how to fish, you eat for life. Now, education is very important because most people, it's very difficult to teach. Most people, especially with employers, entrepreneurs, I find as I coach business owners, they rather do it themselves than teach the next generation to do it. So it's really important for us to teach either our parents or our children, and how you do it is simply by showing them examples. Like for our kids at our home, my children right now, who technically my father's first generation, I'm second, let's say my kids are third, I'm already having him work. At 7 years old, my twin daughters at 5. So I have them on payroll. I am helping them put money into their retirement accounts at 5 years old before kindergarten, so that by the time they're adults, the generational wealth transfer has already been started and in progress. But more importantly, if my son says, Daddy, Mommy, I want Pokemon cards, my wife and I would teach him how to earn it, how to work for it. So one thing my wife comes up with is, how many books did you read this week? The amount of books you read is the amount of knowledge and education you have, and we will pay him through our payroll so he can buy his own books. So at such a young age, we're not teaching the third generation that money comes easy to squander and spend it. You gotta earn it. And then finally, the third one, which is some practical advice, is planning. See, generational wealth is tied to what many people said earlier, freedom, right? And in order to do so, there are what I call the 6 pillars of financial success. If you don't understand one of those pillars, or you mess up one of those 6 pillars, there may not be any generational wealth to be transferred. So the first pillar, especially you are all entrepreneurs, I'll teach you, is called cash flow. How many of you do not understand your profit and loss, your margins? How would you quantify your business valuation? So once you understand cash flow, it's very important for us simultaneously to learn the second pillar, risk management. Risk management is protecting your assets through LLCs, trusts, holding companies, and mitigate the risk that's exposed to you. Because if your business is growing and thriving, and one accident causes litigation and you lose it all, that is tragic, and there is no generational wealth. The third pillar is called wealth accumulation. But wealth accumulation is not the standard society teach us, stocks and bonds. Also, is private equity, hedge fund, growing your business, understanding to how to grow your business valuation so that one day, what's your exit plan? Are you going to IPO? Are you going to sell to private equity? Are you going to create generational income and have succession plan? The fourth one is called tax planning. It doesn't matter how much we make, it's how much we keep. How many of us understand the difference between being a sole proprietor, an S Corp, a C Corp? If you're looking to raise capital, think about becoming a C Corp and having equity strategy. The fifth pillar is retirement distribution. Because as we build wealth, it's kind of like climbing Mount Everest. Do you know more people climb down Mount Everest passing away than climbing up? Too many people focus on the growth. They're not understanding the distribution. So wealth distribution, retirement distribution, means as you're pulling your money back out, how do you mitigate the cost of Social Security, Medicare, and future living? And then finally, if you do those 5 pillars successfully, the 6th one is estate planning. Wills, trust, and estate planning. And how you can create generational wealth is simple. Practicality, create a dynasty trust. So my wife and I, we have a dynasty trust where my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, and beyond will have money regardless if my children and grandchildren does the right thing or not. So if you really want to understand generational wealth, you must understand education, communication, and planning. And then finally, socially generational wealth, in my humble opinion, is state of mind. State of mind. Many Asian minorities were taught to be raised with scarcity versus abundance. Doing this for 17 years, I've met people with millions of debt to people with hundreds of millions and billions of assets. Do you know what's the difference? None of us in this room are showing our numbers publicly. But when I meet someone, I know if they're wealthy or not by the way they think, the abundance. Because at the end of the day, there are people that have lots, but mentally, they're scared. They're frugal. How many Asians, especially older generation, as we work with them, when they get to retirement, they have millions and millions of dollars, and I said, congratulations, you can retire. You know what happens? They don't want to spend it. They said, Rick, you don't understand. Growing up, we're taught saving, saving, saving. And they've done this for 40, 50, 60 years. And when they're at 60, 70 years old, and freedom's in front of them, you know what happens? They have trauma. They can't spend the money they save. So it's about unwinding that trauma so that they have abundance, not scarcity, so that we can all enjoy generational wealth.
So let me ask a question. How many people in this room are actually entrepreneurs who feel like they've hit their top of their game milestone? They're great. There's nothing more for them to achieve. Okay. Well, I had to ask because that's great. We like an honest room. When I first started my business 20-something years ago, I figured out I didn't like people who couldn't run at my speed, and I wasn't going to be the person in the room complaining all the time. The best advice I was ever given was get yourself two things. Number one, first and foremost, get yourself a CPA. And number two, get yourself an IP attorney, right? Most people don't ever start business that way, and that was just advice given to me. Not like, go figure out how much cash flow you have. It was just very fundamentally, how will you manage your money? How will you protect yourself and your money? You are the asset, right? Oh, great advice. Okay, great. Ironically, that CPA is how I got to Rick. All these years later, my CPA is the one who introduced me to Rick. So I just share with you that thought to think about everything he just said. And remember that it starts with you. You are the asset. Now, I think Lawrence, and I'm sure you have a point of view here, but let's just talk it through a little bit. Rick is very methodical, very precise. Now, Lawrence is a little bit off the cuff, as I think we know. So Lawrence, what is your POV in terms of how, I know, does anybody follow him on Instagram? His Instagram is great. It is just filled with his kids on bicycles and him like cheering them on and coaching them as to being the best that they can be. Lawrence, what's your POV?
Okay, thank you. My Instagram is private, but yes, my friends see all the videos and the photos because the reality is that's what I live for. I live for them. They're the loves of my life. The two that I care about most in the world, in addition to my wife. But I think you guys talk about education, right? And you know, because I have ADHD, I grew up in a different environment than I would say most people. Education wasn't as important to me, and I hated school. So how I was able to combat that, I know there's a saying that I always tell people, it's not about how much you know, it's about who you know. And I have been fortunate enough to make my way around to most people here in this room, and those of you who don't know me, I'm going to catch up to you later. But that's how I make these meaningful connections that I can apply to different parts of my life, including business. You know, all my failures in life, I've actually learned a lot from, as I said before. But like those experiences I can share with other people, and they can kind of talk to me about it. Today, what I do in spending my time, is, you know, I'm trying to hustle, as always, building a few businesses with, you know, advice from Rick. I'm one of his clients. But I spend time hanging out with my boys. I coach basketball, baseball, football. Now, I think there's a perspective that I want to share with you guys. All the education in the world, in the next generation, I think is not going to be as important. And I know from, you know, speaking to some of you and knowing some of you, you probably disagree with me. I think education is paramount, but for me, I want to equip my kids, my two boys, with the social skills. And that's why I'm getting them involved in sports. Growing up, I didn't have any mentors that looked like me in sports. Now we have Shohei Ohtani, right? Arguably the best baseball player ever. And I have my kids model their athletic prowess to Shohei Ohtani. Now, the way I see it is all these sports that I get them involved in will open a social circle for them in their lives. Because the fact of the matter is, a golfer, which I play, a tennis player, those social circles are very different from like the basketball players, the football players. And I'm going to continue coaching, but I think the point that I'm trying to make is, what's very important, is building those social skills where you can pass along to that next generation.
So thank you, Lauren, for that, because I think we're touching on a pillar that we don't often talk about. Building the social network that is part of your wealth. Without that, you're kind of standing on your own, right? So as you can see, this is a whole full circle group. Rick actually brought up something, and I don't want to lose this before we get to, and we will not miss Dr. Lanna, is that there is a nuance of a tax code, right, adjustment that has some serious significance. Can we just touch on that just really quickly, Rick? I think it's super important for this room.
Short.
Our trust, future generational wealth kids. But in 2026, if it goes down to 7 million, we lost 6 million of gifting per person. Combined is 12 million. 12 million at 40% tax rate, our kids, grandkids will pay an extra $5 million in taxes. So for all of us that's working so hard, running to build wealth, but the IRS changes its tax code, boom, you vanish a couple $1 million. Why work so hard when you need to also work smart? So it's really important, as Michelle mentioned, for us to equip ourselves to really understand. And that's how we met Michelle, through her introduction from CPA. So it's really important for all of us to know this.
So to emphasize his really very astute point here is, it's not just about acquiring wealth. In this room, you need to be thinking about not just acquiring, but what happens on the back end of it. So that is really smart strategy planning, right? So I'd like to end our session because we're running out of time. As much fun as we're having, at least I'm having fun. Anyway, Dr. Lanna, you have such a great, robust view, but I always wonder too, like, you are on a mad dash. You got 3 different centers. You're definitely acquiring wealth. You are on that path. How do you take the time, and what is your strategy for what happens after that for your beautiful daughters?
One thing I'll say is that you find good people in your life, like Rick, that can help you manage the things that you're not good at, right? And so from a finance perspective, I'll be very honest with you, I really don't know much about numbers or finance or anything like that, and he knows. So I think one of the things that I just want to say is, you hire people that are smarter than you. And you think about, ways of scaling it that way. But when it comes to that work-life harmony and that work-life integration, a lot of it is really just having good people, in your boat, in the boat race. We talk about that dragon boat. You want people to be rowing in the exact same position that you need them to row, in the exact same goal. And there's going to be some people that are not going to be rowing it's the same way. There are going to be people that are probably not rowing at all, right? So you need people on your team that can help you get there, while you can help grow the practice and not necessarily be in the practice. So I do have some great people on my team to help me grow so that I can be home. My husband is here. He's like my biggest fan when it comes to making sure that we get all the video footage of all the things that I do. So it's really just about having a very strong team and family so that I could be there for the kids.
Thank you. So here's our recap. Number 1, building wealth is not just about the race and the speed to acquire as much money to grow your portfolio as you can. It's also about thinking about, what are you going to do when you have a family or friends or a community that you would like to support? You have to be thinking about that in the same track and path. Number 2, the social conversation. If you are not successful, if you are failing, if you are having trouble, I think we as a community have to do a better job of saying, we're not perfect, it's okay. You don't have to be the top of your class. I know we were all trained that way, right? It was like, I got an A. Why didn't you get an A+? Well, I don't know. I mean, is that even a possibility? I think our generation needs to break that. I think we need to be much more cognizant about the more we can advocate support and give each other the runway, that you're going to go up and you're going to go down, that we will, as Rick was talking about, it's not a vertical conversation, folks, right? A community is a 360 perspective. And then I think what Lawrence brings to the conversation, which you also heard, is he understands alongside each one of our panelists, education, your social network, your social collateral is just as equally important and part of your wealth. So I don't know, generational wealth, I mean, part of me says, like, let's come up with something more interesting and relevant, whether or not it's next generation, future generation, current generation. But in this room, I would just advocate for you while you're here, when you shake a hand and get to know somebody, let's not talk about what your title is, and let's not talk about how much money you make or how much business you stamped last year. I think you should spend a little bit more time in this room getting to know the people in front of you, because that's your social wealth. Right? So thank you, Ace Next Gen. Thank you, everyone in this room. We're all here.